The 116th Street is right by where I lived. There was a subway there. And she says, now you get on the subway and take me here. And she'd never say a word. I'd make a mistake, and it would dawn on me we were beyond where we should be, you know. And she'd say, I'd say, this isn't right, Miss Jones. No, it isn't. She says, now how are you going to get back? Well, you have to cross the street, get on the subway on going the other way, you know. So I'd say, we're going to cross the street. Okay.
She was training you.
And we went. We did that for 1 month. There wasn't any place I couldn't go by the time I left Miss Jones. She had day after day. Of course, 2 weeks later, she took me down to the high school where I was to go to school, and got me registered, and that kind of thing. What did Aunt Grace think I was going to do, going to school with no one to nowhere to? It just appalls me that she didn't think of those things.
She had her mind on her studies.
Well, wasn't on me.
Now,
So,
is this the time in your life when you gained a testimony of the gospel?
I think so.
After all these experiences, I think you would.
I think so. I knew I was being watched.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate in high school. My English teacher, Miss Harris was her name, and she took me under her wing. She had a little group of girls that she liked very much, and she had a room downstairs where the cafe was. You had 4 lunch times in the school, because there were 8,000 of us. And
8,000 students?
yes. And there were around the school was a big high iron fence. I imagine around 11, 12 feet high. Those doors clanked shut at 9 o'clock, and if you weren't in, you couldn't get in. You just had to go home. And they were closed until they opened at 3:30, so you could get out. But she had these girls. They met downstairs in a book room, and we ate our lunch together. And I had that companionship. In fact, one of the girls, I wrote to all of them for a long time. I'd say 15, 20 years. But this one girl stayed with me. Her name was Eleanor Blank.
Took Marilyn and DeVerl and...
I didn't have to take Marilyn. I took DeVerl and Billy to take exams to get in.
Oh, I see.
But at any rate, Miss Jones was just wonderful.
She was your salvation, wasn't she?
You have no idea what she did for me.
She was your salvation.
Yes. And
We might mention that this is tape 2 of our interview with Grace. Go ahead.
is this on now?
Yes.
So I went to school, and we had some odd experiences. Aunt Grace had to give a speech one time in church. And she said I had taken her all over Manhattan because that's where I had learned where to go and how to get there. And I took Sarah. Sarah and I went to church together downtown. There was, I think, only one branch for the whole of Manhattan at that time. And it was in the Steinway Piano building. So we had music all the time we were in church. Then Sarah had Sunday afternoons off. And then I'd take her wherever we wanted to go. Chinatown, to a show, to any place. We went everywhere on Sundays. We never went back home till night. But Aunt Grace this particular time said, do you think you can get me where I belong to give this speech? And it was in Queens. So I wasn't acquainted, but I must have been full of
Confidence?
Feeling that I could do it, because I said, yes, I'll take you. So we did. I got lost. She says, it's in a basement. I know it's in a basement. So well, we passed this basement and the lights were on, and she said, I'll bet it's right here. So down the basement we went. We got into a wedding. And it was a Jewish wedding. And oh, they met us the minute we got there. We were enfolded in arms. Oh, cousin, I'm so glad to see you. I haven't seen you for ages. It just went on. And we got all involved in this wedding, and we couldn't get out. And they kept bringing us liquor. And she says, don't you drink that. I knew I wasn't going to drink that. Of the two of us, I was the smartest. I wasn't going to get in that trouble. But there was a paper palm tree. So after a while, we put our drinks in the bottom. She says, be sure and don't hit the paper, because it'll wilt. So we went to the wedding for the night. We never got to church. We went to the wedding. Oh, another time I was with her, and we used to buy tickets to Broadway shows. Neither one of us could afford a seat, so we bought standing room, and you could stand in the back, watch the show, just as good as any, only you had to stand. So I remember this show very well. It was Wuthering Heights, no, not Wuthering Heights, something about Winterset. And she saw a couple sitting down below us. She says, I want to put those in my play. She says, I want to watch them. See what they do with their hands. Their way they take care of their way their body movements are. And so after the show, she says, do you care if we follow them? I said, no. So it was about 10 o'clock. So they went to the hotel, Roosevelt, I think, Roosevelt Hotel. I bet that doesn't exist anymore. And there was a balcony, sort of like this, with a dance floor down below. And in this balcony, it was large, it was about as wide as this room, and all the way around the dance floor, that's where people sat and ate. So she and I sat at a table. This couple had a table down on the side of the dance floor, and so we positioned ourselves so that she could see and watch them. Well, we sat there 2 or 3 hours with her watching them, and then we decided to go. Well, then the waiter came up during that time, and he said, asked us what we wanted, and she said, well, nothing. He says, well, you can't sit here with nothing. So she said, well, bring us 2 root beers. I guess he could have just died, but he brought us 2 root beers. And we sat there and drank our root beer. finally she was ready to go home. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And she said, I don't know whether I've got enough money to buy these repairs. How much money have you got? I had 50 cents with me. She had a couple of dollars. Well, the man came up with the bill, and there was a cover charge of $15.
Oh, my, that's a lot of money in those days.
In those days, yes. And we didn't know what to do. We sat there for a while longer, and finally she called the waiter over, and she says, we weren't aware that there was a cover charge, and we're very sorry. We'll give you all the money we can give you, that we've got, but that's all we can do. He says, well, I'll call the manager. So the manager came to see us. And he couldn't believe. He just couldn't believe that there were 2 people on earth so stupid. He says, well, give me what money you have, and then you 2 leave. So we were very happy to leave. We gave him the money. I think it was $2.50. I think that's about what it was. And when we got out in the lobby, both of us had been to the show and all over. We had to go to the bathroom. Well, I looked, she left me, and I looked up where she had gone, and she went in the men's lavatory. Well, I couldn't wait and unravel that, because I had to go too, so I found the ladies, and by the time I got out, the ladies, there were 2 policemen with her on both sides of her. And they called the manager. He was the same guy that they tried to get rid of. And he couldn't believe he was seeing us again. And so he ushered us out. We got out. And I said to her, I've been down on 5th Avenue an awful lot. You take a bus, you don't take I said, and we were only a block away from 5th Avenue. I said, let's walk down a block and wait for the bus.
You saved up enough money for bus fare.
We didn't have any money.
Oh, yes.
But we'd given them all, the money all gone. I was going to tell you that later when we got, finally a policeman came up and he says, what are you 2 women standing here for? And she says, well, we're waiting for the bus. He says, the bus doesn't go on nights. Well, I didn't know that. He says, you've got to get over to the... But in the meantime, it had dawned on us that we had given that guy all our money. And so he says, you're going to have to go over to the subway. It was just a little further to walk. And Aunt Grace said, well, we haven't any money in the subway.
This is what she said to the policeman?
Yes. I don't know, you could go for a dime in those days, you know. Or was it a nickel? I think it
probably
was
a nickel in 35.
But anyhow, he called the police. When the police heard our story, he said, I'll take you to your apartment. So we got home with the policeman.
You went in the police car?
Yes, we went in the police car. And we got home. What a night that was. So I had a lot of experiences with her. That's an awful lot.
And you were 16 years old?
I was 16. Just barely turned 16.
Oh, my land.
And so that's the story.
I want to back up a little bit about some of your experiences with your father.
All right.
let's talk a little bit about when you were 10, you used to driving?
14.
When I was 10, he taught me how to drive. And I drove him while he slept in the back.
I wondered if that was why you were driving, so that he could get his rest.
He slept.
Now, you didn't need a driver's license in those days.
No, he didn't.
What
Well-
kind of a car was it?
A Willis Knight.
What does that look like?
Well,
There's a little picture in one of your books,
it's very narrow.
and it was
We
kind
had two Willis Knights. We had Daddy's Willis Knight was a one-seater, one door, two-door.
okay, but was this a double?
This was four-door,
I think that we've got a picture of it in your album,
yeah,
and that's what you drove.
that's what I drove. I drove the little one too, but he used the back seat in the big one to sleep, because lots of times he didn't get to bed for 3 or 4 nights. If he'd get down to Emery, the roads were not oiled in those days, they were just gravel, and he couldn't come back home. The baby might be born while he's gone. He'd have to stay. And he would sleep. Now, some of these people, I guess I'd have a lot of people argue this with me, but I have had other people tell me that when these Norwegians, which is most of the people in Emery County, came from Norway or Denmark or
Scandinavian.
Sweden, they're all Scandinavians, that they were not clean. And they knew nothing about germs. And they questioned people who did know about germs. That was a lot of baloney. And their houses were not clean. Now, I've seen my father out with a number 2 tub, build a fire in the person's yard with one of these plungers, washing the sheets to deliver the baby in, so they would be clean. And I saw that lots of times. I can see him out there plunging, getting those sheets ready, hoping to heaven they dried before the baby came. And we had broken arms, and I told you, when I was 14, he trusted me with the ether, and I gave ether to kids with broken arms and things that they had to be put out. There were no hospitals. The closest hospital was Price, still is. And that's what we did. Now, in the wintertime, there weren't heaters in cars. We had 2 sacks of brick. And that stayed in Mother's oven unless she was baking, which wasn't very often. However, Mother loved to make bread, and made very good bread. And we would take the heated brick and put under a robe around our feet. And that's the way we kept warm. Then my father would take that those brick in to the ladies' oven wherever he was stopping by, and let them heat. And we had another sack that we used. It was mainly for me because I was out in the car alone. Daddy never took me into a lady's house.
I don't understand how you said that they'd feed him, but they wouldn't feed you.
They always knew what he wanted to eat. I could see him in the window eating away. I had these crackers.
Ritz
Right.
crackers.
Never Ritz crackers. Never bought a box in my whole married life. Can't even look at them on the store window, the store shelves.
Well, why would they bring you some food out?
Why, what?
Why wouldn't they feed you?
I don't think they knew I was there. It never occurred to me that they should.
In those days, was he ever called out for diphtheria or any of the quarantine diseases?
Oh, yes. And my father was very, very careful with that.
Tell us about
When
that.
I got older, I could see his fear. He was afraid of, what do you call it?
Carrier, being a carrier.
No,
No, epidemic.
epidemic. That's the word I wanted.
Epidemic, yeah.
And so his quarantines were very strict. And they didn't like it around here. But that was okay. He was not going to go back on that.
So as the doctor here, he could quarantine a family.
Yes, and he called the sheriff. And the sheriff had a little cardboard thing written what you had, whooping cough, and put that on your door. And you weren't allowed to take that off until the sheriff came and took it off. And you didn't let a kid out until it was off. Now, so that he could teach these people around here that they had to be quarantined, we were always quarantined a week more. So that if they were quarantined for chickenpox for 2 weeks, we were quarantined for 3.
Yourself.
To teach people that that had to be. And I think it was a fear that he had his whole time he was here. He never mentioned it to me, but I know him well enough to. Daddy and I were together all the time.
You were very close to your father then.
Very. Very close. And I think he was so afraid of an epidemic coming into a community and losing maybe 20 or 30 people out of 100. But he was very careful about those quarantines.
Where did he go to medical school?
At Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
See, Aunt Ida's boy, Dan
MacArthur.
and Daddy were cousins. They weren't only cousins, but see, Aunt Ida had brought up Grandma. What was she, 4 when her mother died?
That's right.
And
And their father was already dead.
yes,
And Ida was quite a bit older.
and she was 14 when she took over the
But she
family.
was 10 years older than grandmother.
Yes,
And that 10 years made her mother, yeah.
yes. So Uncle Dan and Daddy were extremely close. Very, very close. Uncle Dan was the oldest. He had gone to school in Philadelphia.
Was he a doctor?
He's a dentist, or was a dentist. And so he's a doctor, but not a medical doctor. He knew my mother, and they were engaged.
Oh, Dan MacArthur and
Dan
your mother
MacArthur
were
and your
engaged?
and
They were
Margaret
going to
Lee
get
was
married.
engaged? Okay. This
And
is getting interesting.
Uncle Dan came home. Now, Daddy was engaged to a girl here by the name of Cox. He was always very close to the Cox family as I was growing up, but I didn't know or understand the connection for a long time. I had a girlfriend that I lived with when I went to the Y. We were together an awful lot. She died last March. It isn't quite a year now since she died. And her mother was a sister. She was a Cox. To the sister that my father was engaged to. Aunt Hattie.
Hattie Cox was her name?
Yes. And so Uncle Dan said to Daddy, I've got a girl in Philadelphia. I want you to watch over her. Daddy said, well, that's okay, because I've got a girl in Orangeville, and you watch over her. They watched over him very well. They traded.
Did they really?
Uncle Dan married Aunt Hattie.
Really?
Daddy married Mother.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
You never know.
So that's how he got to know your mother?
Yeah.
Because she was engaged to her,
Well,
to his cousin?
Yeah, see, the church wasn't very large, so these people would come to church, and Mother's family would take them home for Sunday dinner, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was very easy for him to contact my mother,
Yeah.
very easy.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yes, Afton, who was Uncle Dan's daughter, I don't remember who Afton married. Anyway, she and I, when we were growing up, used to wonder what we'd look like if it was mixed turned around.
It's the other way around.
Well, did you know that Steve Rich's wife is from the MacArthur family?
No, I didn't. Effie
Melinda.
Which?
Melinda Rich. Steve's
she's-
Effie Dean's
Oh,
Effie Dean's boy.
I see.
Yeah, they're from the MacArthur's.
Yeah. Well, that's,
Well, they get
Well,
around.
shall we give her a rest and we'll go and have lunch? Take her to lunch and then we'll come back and...
let me take you today. I feel sorry.
How did you and Jean handle discipline in your high school classes?
Well, we never had any problems. Never.
Why?
I don't know.
Well, what did you do?
I had other teachers ask me. They'd say, you are shorter than all the kids you teach. And they were having all kinds of trouble. And what you do, and I have come to the conclusion that discipline in school is much like being able to play the piano very well. You're gifted to that particular thing. And I don't, I had a teacher at BYU, her name was Miss Hollingshead, and she was an education teacher. She was about my size, only she was very pretty, and an old maid. And she told me this, that I kept all the time. She says, you're shorter, you're going into secondary education, you're shorter than most of the people that you will teach. You have one thing that you mustn't ever do, and that's say, I'll send you to the principal's office. She says, it will soon dawn on those kids that they have to go to the principal's office. She says, you take care of it. And I did. And I had very low problems, very low. Gene didn't have any. He did, you know, some. You're going to have some, but we never had anything. I think they liked us, for one thing. And we were husband and wife, and we were told not to bother with each other, that it was against the rules to hire a husband and wife in one school. And so the principals told us, we want you both, but stay away from each other through the day. And we did. He taught in the hall in the front, I taught in the hall in the back. I know one girl came in, of these people that I was telling you about, that was on the dam on the power plant. She came in for her first day. She had this paper in her hand. She says, "Your name is Johansson?" I said, "Yes." She says, "There's a Johansson in the front hall that I gotta have history from. Is he any relation to you?" I said, "No, he isn't." She said, "Good." And she always said what she wanted to say. She was very against Mormons, so she had a Bull Durham. She wore the same things every day, but I'm sure a clean one each time. A white shirt and tight Levi's. How she ever got those Levi's on, I'll never know. And she had a Bull Durham in this pocket with the little tag out, so you could be sure that she wasn't one of these crazy Mormons. And one day she walked in about 2 weeks later. She says, "You lied to me." And I said, "No, I didn't." She says, "You told me you weren't related to that man in the front hall." I says, "I'm not." I said, "If I'd been related to him, I couldn't have married him." She says, "That's a Mormon for you. They get around everything." But that's the way it was.
Do you think your presence, your confidence, your standing up before the class, and
You knowing what you knew, you knew where you wanted to go, and
I guess.
that's a lot of it, don't you think?
Well, I was in an activity situation, except for the English classes.
mhm.
See, I played with them in phys ed. I had another type of relationship in speech. We were performing. It was an activity class.
They wanted to be there.
And, oh yes.
That makes a difference, doesn't
But you
it?
know, it brings me to mind about 3 boys that came into my class for preparation for college. And I had heard about these 3. I'd been in faculty meetings when other teachers had said, "I'm not going to have them in my room. I won't have them. That's all." And I had heard about all this. Well, this first day of school, in popped these 3 to my English class.
All 3.
And I thought, oh, no. What are we going to do? One boy was from Huntington, one was from Orangeville, and the other boy lived in Farron, but his father had come in on one of the things at the plant. His name was Adam Gunn. I'll never forget him. But when they walked in, I said, "Jordan, your seat is right over here." And it was the first seat on the furthest row from my desk. And I said, "Robert, your seat is on the 3rd row on the very back seat." And then I said, "Adam, your seat is right here under my desk." "Well, have we got assigned seats in this class?" I said, "You 3 have." "Well, how long's it going to last?" I said, "The 27th of May." "Well, that's the day school lets out." I said, "Yeah, that's right." So in they came. I found out that this Adam he said he'd been to school in Virginia. He had a very, very good background in English. He knew more than I did. He was good, and he was smart. I used him later on for kids that were having troubles. I'd say, Adam, you take these 5 kids down in the corner and go over and over this English. I learned at a very early age in education that your basis of learning is repetition. It isn't anything else, and I think that's why so many teachers fail them today. Because the kids have learned to be by TV all the time, they are constantly entertained, and when you start repeating in a classroom, we'll bore them. We'll never keep their interest. That's a lot of baloney. You repeat and you repeat and you repeat till they know it. And if they're bored, who cares?
Yeah.
That's always been my fundamental object. And how about some kids? I used to say to them, don't you go out in the hall and call me names and holler about what I have made you do in class. You come right up here by my desk and you tell me what you think. And we'll talk it through. Don't you have any of these feelings behind my back. And they did.
That's good.
They come up once in a while, and I don't like this. Or, Mrs. Joel, this just isn't my interest. I'd say, the hell it is. We'll get you interested. Because you'll hear it so damn much that you'll know it. So, that was my, that's the way I took him. But anyway, this Jordan, one day he came to me and I had an outline for book reports. I never saddled a kid to read me back or write me back what they've read in a story. I just had sentences they had to fill in. What character did you like best? They would have had to read it to answer the questions. But who was the main character? Who was the antagonist in the story? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they filled these in. So up he comes with this all typed so beautifully. And his mother had called me on the phone. I had his mother in school as a student. And she told me, she says, now Mrs. Joe, he has read the book, but I have typed his report. So I want you to know he's done the work. I've just done his report. I thought, oh, who's pulling whose leg here? So I said, okay. So I said to him, Jordan, you never read The Tale of Two Cities. You'd have thrown it down the first day. Don't tell me, and I didn't call him aside or anything. I talked to him right in class. I said, I know you didn't read The Tale of Two Cities. Oh, yes, I did. I said, all right, you get up in front of class and you tell us The Tale of Two Cities. He did. He took all hour, and he didn't finish. I'll tell you the rest tomorrow. I said, we haven't time tomorrow. I said, you've read The Tale of Two Cities. So he had a good time. You know, those three, they tried to get at me a lot of times, and sometimes they won. But I always was a good sport. But anyway, one day, I walked into class, the door was in the back. I walked in and I could see the way the kids were looking at each other that something was up. I walked up and looked around and there was Adam. He was kind of red-headed and he had a lot of hair on his chest, and he had opened his shirt, and he had put up the hair on his chest with bobby pins. Well, you know, for just a few minutes I thought, how am I going to handle this? And I certainly asked the Lord to bless me. So I said, Adam, I can understand with my type of personality and my good looks and my fun to be with that you have fallen in love with me. And I said, but I said, there's a difference in age there. There's a lot of difference in between, and I said, I'm just a little scared to give you an inch. He says, Mrs. Joe, will you please shut up? I said, oh no, I've got a lot more to say. So I went on, telling him how sorry I was that we couldn't get on a date and do something very romantic. Finally he said, and all the time I was talking to him, the shirt was getting buttoned up. And he says, you know, I've got two things I can do. If you don't shut up, I'm going to walk out of this room. And he says, I might never come back. I said, oh, you'll come back. I've got all this appeal to you. You'll be back. I said, but I'm so sorry we can't do something about it. But I said, you know, I've got a husband. You realize that? Well, I do. I take a class from him. So he buttoned up and he came around. He never tried anything on me again. And when he graduated, he came up to me after graduation. And I said, well, Adam, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going in the Army. There isn't anything else I can do. He says, my folks haven't got any money to send me to college. I said, well, you've got a wonderful mind, don't you? And when you get into the Army, see if you can push yourself into some kind of training that is interesting to you, that you'd like to do. And Jean was standing by me, and I said, and let me know how you get along. I've never seen or heard from him since that night. But he said to Jean, can I kiss her goodbye? I says, Adam, on the cheek. So he kissed me goodbye on the cheek.
That's cute. Were his folks from this area?
Hmm?
Were his folks old timers here?
Oh no, they were from Virginia.
From Virginia.
From the Virginia coal mines.
Oh.
So I've met disciplinary problems, but I have always solved them myself. Heavens, I taught the principal. He wasn't as bright as I was. No, you send them up there. And I taught two principals that I had. So
That's
well, I had one problem once, and it wasn't my class. The phys ed teacher that came after I left the phys ed department, and I left that about 6 years before I retired. I got old and I thought, the kids want me to, I want someone younger to do basketball and gymnastics and the whole bit. And they did get another teacher, and I taught more English classes. But one day the phys ed teacher had to leave. And we had been told out in the shop class and mechanical arts and speech or phys ed, places where kids had to dress or put implements up, their tools. We have to excuse them a little early. The principal was very, very touchy on this subject. They were not to be in the hall. Waiting. Excuse me. Waiting to go to dinner. This girl was, what was her name? I never forget her. I'll think of it in a minute. And so I had her in a phys ed class that really wasn't my class. I was taking that class for the woman. And she went out in the hall. And I took her by the top of her arm and I said, "You come in here, into the gym, until the bell rings. And I don't have to do what you say. You're not my teacher." I said, "Yes, you do have to do what I say, because I am a teacher." So I propelled her into the gym, got right by the bleachers. And she says, "You touched me." And these kids are saying, if the teachers touch you, you can sue them. I said, "I'll do worse than touch you if you don't straighten up right now. I don't have to do what you say." So I pushed her, and I didn't mean to push her so hard, but I pushed her right through the bleachers, and she landed inside the bleachers. Oh! And she was one that came in. She wasn't a local. What was her name? God. Anyway, she crawled out, and she was humiliated. And she says, "You can't do that to me." I says, "Oh, yes, I can." And I pushed her in again.
Were there other people around?
The whole class was right there.
Oh.
So then the bell rang and she left. And I'll be darned, I don't see how her mother got from Orangeville to the school. I'd hardly turned around. Her mother was there and she was going to sue us. Jean had told me over and over and over, don't get in a position where they can take what we built all these years. I felt terrible because I saw all his farms going. And but I wasn't going to take that from some little snippy girl. So the mother said, "Well, there's nothing else to do but sue you." Well, by 3:30, that was at noon, by 3:30 I had the school, the UEA lawyer down, and the regional lawyer that lives in Richfield up. They were there by 3:30.
Mm.
They took a hold of the case real. They put the mother in a questioning situation.
Deposition, yeah.
Which they kept me from. I wasn't there. And she talked herself into trouble. She said the girl was on dope, and I found out later she was on dope. And she was high on dope when I pushed her around. Maybe that's why I could push her around, I don't know. And the mother just talked and talked and talked until they brought Gene in. And of course he was terribly upset. You could see what might happen. And he said, well, if you sue us, we will countersue. Because he says, you've given us enough information that you can't sue us. She said the girl beat her up every day. Every day of her life, she beat the mother up. And high on dope. So I had that experience.
My
I
goodness.
had another experience with a girl in phys ed who I never had any girls that sat out. I fixed them so that they all played. We had all teams, so everyone participated. I used to go in this other teacher's class and she'd have a row there of kids reading books and whatnot, but that was her problem, but while I was doing it, they played. I had a very good teacher at the Y who told me to never choose sides in a phys ed class, because you're going to get the little kids that can't play very well standing there
That's
constantly at the tail end
It's true.
to be chosen.
And how it makes them feel like this.
Yeah. So when we chose sides, I'd say, all you blondes get over there, and all you blackheads get over here. And or if you didn't make your bed this morning, you belong on this team. The kids that made your bed can belong on this team.
So nobody was on that team.
I just divided them up that way.
Hmm.
And
That's pretty smart.
I guess maybe I was just a little bit of fun for them. But they had more fun than they had pressure.
Well, that makes
Tried
a
to take
lot.
care of but this one girl, she said, I'm not going to play today, I don't feel good. And they didn't see, I was the phys ed teacher. So anybody that was sick had to get a note from me to take to the secretary to let them go home. One day this girl went into the principal and she says, you've got to write me an excuse, I am sick. He says, you go to Mrs. Joe and she'll write you a note. She says, I can't go to Mrs. Joe. He says, why? She says, because I'm still breathing.
Gosh.
So I had that bad reputation.
Tell-
You know, they come like, I've got a headache. I said, so have I. Go back to class. So,
What?
so it didn't help much. This girl said, I'm not going to play. I said, yes, you are. So, what team should we put you on? I'm not going to play. I said, yes, you are. You're going to play. She played all period. Well, she called her mother when the class was over, and she says, I'm sick, and Mrs. Joe made me play all period. So her mother came in, and she told me, she said, I'll call my mother, and she's going to come out and talk to you. I said, okay. She was from Huntington. So her mother comes in, and she says, Mrs. Joe, are you still a phys ed teacher? I had her in school. She turned to her daughter. I didn't know the daughter belonged to who she belonged to. She turned to her daughter and she says, Mrs. Joe's the best teacher I ever had. She says, if she said you could play for an hour, you can play for an hour. and she stormed out.
Oh, that's something.
So I've had a few, you know,
Encounters.
but I got out of them.
Now, how did you get this Mrs. Joe?
What's
Oh,
this is Johansson.
It happened at the beginning.
Did you keep a diary,
oh,
journal?
we have kids, well, they were kids. I've got people here in their 60s that I miss a Joe. I had them in school,
Uh-huh.
so
But how did that come?
I don't know.
Well, it's just,
I really don't.
Well, Johansson, but short for Joe,
It just, Joe.
perhaps.
But you
He
never
was
kept a
Mr.
journal.
Joe and I was Mrs. Joe.
you never kept a journal through these years.
Hmm?
You never kept a journal through these years.
No.
Daily journal.
So,
Here it is.
you gotta remember, Loretta, I was keeping the house just as clean as it is right now. I had 7 kids. I went to drill team at 6:30. I had gymnastics at 3:30 till 5:30. I came home and got the children their dinner and went to play practice at 7 and came home at 11. Now,
That was
my
your
day.
routine.
There was no way of writing a journal.
That was your routine.
I did have, I'm a good organizer. I was a good organizer in school. I had people working toward what we were doing all the time. But I also had my own family. Now, when we began, we met as a family, and I said, this is what we're going to do before we go to school. And I will assign you, and then we will trade each week. We did that about 3 weeks. And then the kids came back to me and they said, we can do better if we have a job that we do all the time and not change. So from there on, we didn't change. Scott made all the beds in the mornings. Bryce dusted. The house was dusted through. We didn't have all these streets, and we did have a lot of dust at that time. I was cooking breakfast while this was being done, and everybody had a job. Natalie was far enough ready so that she could clean up the breakfast, and we worked it all that way.
Everyone pitched in.
Hmm?
Everyone pitched in.
Everyone did it. Now, I had newspapers for tablecloths. I still use them here where I'm alone. You could put a newspaper down, especially if you put the sports in front of Bryce, the editorials in front of Scott, the funnies in front of another one. And I did that. It was like placemats. And then all you had to do was roll up the papers, no matter what had spilled or what had. And so the newspapers got thrown out and the table was clean.
That's pretty clever.
We, so I had help, but I organized it so that we were all,
You worked as a team.
yeah. Scott said, what would happen to this place if I sneezed? I don't know. Scott was always kind of funny. I remember once we were at Phyllis's, and Heidi was the darndest baby. She cried a lot. In fact, she bothered my father once when we were on a trip together that Daddy gave her a pill on Saturday. Phyllis called me on Monday and she says, Heidi's still asleep. What shall I do? I says, all you do is wait till she wakes up. But anyhow, she really put on the show. We were there, and we all got in the car to come home. We'd been riding for about 10 minutes, and Scott says, I don't want you to take this wrong. He was about 12, I think. He says, how's Phyllis's health? She was the only one that he anticipated
He wasn't sure he
that
wanted
we'd
to have
get
another.
Heidi.
Oh.
Oh
dear.
my gosh.
But Phyllis raised her own, so.
Well, you certainly
How's
should be commended
Phyllis's health?
for what you've done for this family.
Hmm?
You're to be commended for what you've done for this family.
Oh, it isn't. I'm not done anything special.
Oh, yes, you have.
Not
It's
really.
not every sister that would have done what you've done, Grace.
Grace, without giving us a lot of detail, just give us a rundown chronologically of how everybody came into your family. You
Well-
started out with Jean, and then you had your babies.
Well, yes.
Craig and Margaret were first.
I had Phyllis when I first started.
Oh, that's right.
I brought Phyllis home with me. And then,
Your sister. Mhm.
yeah, and then we were married in 1940, and Craig was born in 1942. So I had, and then Margaret was born in 1944. Scott was born in 1950, but so was Bryce. There's only 3 months between those. Scott was born in March and Bryce was born in July. When there was a lot of problems in Marge Dean's home that I wasn't aware of. I was down here, I was busy. Mother never said anything to me when I'd go up. I think she was trying to solve the problem and didn't want to talk about it. Daddy, I learned something about him as I got older, that when Daddy had to meet a terrible problem, he did something else. It's just like when Gladys got so sick.
Yeah.
He couldn't face the fact that she was going to die, and so he ignored it.
Kind of in denial.
And that was one of his bad traits. We can't all be perfect, you know.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful person, but he had that trait. And so I know that while this was going on with Marge Dean and Nevin, both of them alcoholics, the children not taken care of, just about drove my mother crazy. She had a lady next door that would call her when things were bad and the children were locked out, and Phyllis would go down and get them. I didn't know anything about that at the time. So one day, they didn't call and tell me that Jay was coming or anything. He arrived with the 2 boys. Brent was 6 and Bryce was 4. And Bryce had been hit with a car while he was riding his bicycle. He was too young, he shouldn't have been riding a bicycle. And he had a broken leg and a couple of broken ribs, and he was in a wheelchair.
That's what Jay brought
That's
for you
when
to
they
take
brought
care
him.
of.
So I said, Jay says, things are so bad up at Marge Dean's. I brought down the children for a while. And I said, how long? He says, oh, about 2 weeks. Well, it's been 50 years. But, Anyway, that doesn't matter. Brent was a little hard. He was 6. He apologized to me a few years ago. He said, I gave you so much trouble because I had had to be the father, more or less, in the home, both parents drinking. And he said, I thought I could solve it. And I kept thinking I could solve it. But at the same time, he also told me that he got down here and he was number 3. Craig and Margaret were older. And he wasn't the oldest anymore. He was the 3rd.
An adjustment
And that
for him.
hurt